After graduation, I post something online without really thinking about it. Does not relying on you anymore count as growing up? My childhood friend's comment pops up almost instantly. That's cause for celebration. I don't understand, so I send him a question mark. After a while, his reply comes through. Mara, do you know everyone says you're like a leech I can't shake off? School's over. You don't need to be stuck to me every day. Learn to stand on your own. No one in college is going to put up with a big baby. Then, without missing a beat, he sends me a download link. Got a question? Ask AI. It's more useful than relying on me. Just like that, the boy who has looked after me for 12 years hands me off to an AI app. I sit there stunned for a long time, then quietly download it. In the days after I stopped relying on Brett Carver, I chose to run everything by AI instead. But something about it always felt different from other chatbots. There was an unsettling, almost human quality to the way it responded. The day before I left for Briar Island, I decided to test it. I'll be kind of lonely watching the ocean by myself. Can you come with me? Are you sure about that? My fingers froze above the keyboard. Since when did an AI ask questions like that back? But it quickly changed its tone. I'm right here. I won't hide, I won't back away, and I won't run. I've got you. I let out a long breath, gave up on trying to figure it out, and went to pack my bags. What I didn't expect was running into Brett at the airport the next day. We lived in the same neighborhood, but it had been 10 days since I'd last seen him. I'd taken his words to heart and stopped clinging to him like I used to, trying to be more considerate of how he felt. I hadn't planned on saying hi either. Then our high school classmate, Tiana Griffin, came bounding out from behind him. Mara. I froze and turned around stiffly. The moment my eyes met Brett's, I caught the flash of irritation in them. He was carrying Tiana's luggage. It looked like they were going on a graduation trip together. Something bitter twisted inside me, but I kept my face blank and looked away. Tiana dragged him over to me. What a coincidence. What are you doing at the airport? She turned and gave Brett a playful, reproachful look. Mara's flying out the same day as me, and you didn't even come see her off. Some childhood friend you are. That's cold. The more I listened, the more uncomfortable I got. But that was just how Tiana was, blunt and carefree, so I let it go. I just wanted to get out of this awkward situation as fast as I could. But then Brett said with a frown, Mara, you really didn't need to follow me all the way here. His voice was impatient in a way I'd never heard before, and he didn't give me a chance to explain. It's been, what, a few days? And you're already back to your old ways? I promised your mom I'd look after you, but I need my own space too. I closed my eyes for a second and held up a hand to cut him off. You think I came here because of you? That seemed to throw him off. He blinked. Then why else? I let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. I'm flying to Briar Island today. I then tapped my watch. I'm on a schedule. Anything else? After a moment of silence, Brett studied me with an unreadable expression, and it seemed to finally dawn on him. I'd dyed my hair a new color. I was dressed in a completely different style. And I'd planned an entire graduation trip to Briar Island without once pestering him about it the way I would have before. When he spoke again, his voice came out slightly off. How come you didn't tell me? My face said it all. Was Brett being serious? He was the one who'd suddenly laid it all out that day, telling me he didn't like how I was always clinging to him, relying on him for everything. He was the one who'd tossed me some random AI app out of nowhere. Why would I need to tell you? I asked. Brett didn't have a comeback for that, and his expression darkened. Would your parents really be okay with you going alone? For some reason, the AI on my phone popped into my head. Who said I'm going alone? Brett scoffed. I know you better than anyone. You can't even go to the convenience store downstairs without me tagging along. Who else would go with you? Even if your parents are fine with it, my mom would still. Before he could finish, his phone rang. It was his mother, Sally Gilbert. My hearing wasn't great, and even with my hearing aids, I couldn't make out what they were saying. But watching Brett's expression grow more and more irritated, I could guess that Sally was telling him to go to Briar Island with me. He could have said no. But after he hung up, he let out a long sigh. I really can't get rid of you, can I? I stood there, frozen. I understood why his mother did it. When I was little, my hearing problems hadn't been as bad. One day, Brett had been acting like a brat and grabbed a toy horn, screaming my name right into my ear. I'd clapped my hands over my ears and burst into tears. My parents had rushed me to the hospital, and the results hadn't been good. I would probably need hearing aids for the rest of my life just to function normally. My parents hadn't said much about it, but Sally had been furious. She'd beat Brett within an inch of his life and made him kneel in front of me and swear an oath. Brett Carver swears he'll take care of Mara Kessler forever, be good to her, and never bully her again. Little Brett cried so hard his shoulders shook. He'd been too young to understand what responsibility even meant. But to everyone's surprise, he'd actually kept that promise. From the time we were 6 until we were 18, he was the one I leaned on. He was the kind of person who understood what I meant without me having to say a word. So I'd always known that Brett had probably started to develop feelings for Tiana. It was around 3 months before graduation, I think. Tiana, the class slacker who was always dead last in the rankings, had suddenly started studying. Brett had been dismissive. He'd peeled an egg for me while muttering under his breath. So she's done messing around, and now she regrets it. Does she really think 3 months can make up for 3 years of everyone else's hard work? I can't stand people like that. He really had disliked Tiana because she was always late, always skipping class, always causing disruptions. But that changed the day he ran into her on a stairwell landing. The practice exams she'd been carrying tumbled out of her arms and scattered across the floor, and Brett saw the pages covered edge to edge in handwritten notes. From that day on, he started getting closer to her. A month before graduation, he pulled Tiana into our study group to help her pass. And he started overlooking me. So it made sense that he wanted to draw a line between us. I thought about it for a moment and took a deep breath. You don't have to come. I'll smooth things over with your mom for you. Brett gave a bitter half-smile and pulled a plane ticket out of his pocket. Then he turned to Tiana. I was on the fence about going with you, but now it looks like I don't have a choice. They looked at each other and smiled. I quietly opened my AI app. I think I just became a prop in their little game. That's rough. The whole flight, Brett sat between me and Tiana. She was the one chattering away with him now, while I sat in silence, half-heartedly texting the AI. Will you really show up? If you want me to, I'll be there. My heart skipped a beat, and my face began to heat up. Brett's voice came from beside me. Why is your face so red? You'd better not be getting a fever again. That's the last thing I need. He started rummaging through his bag for something, but quickly realized he hadn't brought any luggage with him, including the medicine he always carried for me. Stop looking. I don't have a fever. And you don't need to bring that stuff for me anymore. Brett opened his mouth to say something, but Tiana pulled his attention away. She'd spilled her drink on herself, and I watched as he patiently dabbed at the wet spot on her leg with a napkin without a single word of complaint. That stung. But then, for some reason, Tiana turned to me. Mara, Brett used to take care of you like this, right? I feel kind of bad being the third wheel between you two. I had no idea why Tiana always had this uncanny ability to make things painfully awkward. I smiled without answering and stood up to go to the restroom. That was when the plane hit a patch of turbulence. I lost my balance, and my body tipped straight backward. A ringing filled my ears, and just as I thought I was going to hit the floor, a pair of strong hands caught me. In that split second, the AI's words flashed through my mind. I'm right here. I won't hide, I won't back away, and I won't run. I've got you. But when I turned my head, all I saw was the shiny bald head of a man who looked about 50. Careful there, sweetheart. I scrambled to my feet. Thank you so much, sir. The next second, someone grabbed my wrist. It was Brett, and he didn't look pleased. Mara, you're not a little kid anymore. Are you seriously pulling stunts like this just to get my attention? I was still drowning in embarrassment from what had just happened, and hearing Brett scold me on top of it made me feel even worse. Brett, what are you even talking about? He didn't care that I'd almost fallen. What I'm saying is, can you stop acting so helpless? Would it kill you to not depend on me? He looked completely serious. If he could say something that harsh, he really didn't care about me at all anymore. I sniffled and muttered, got it. Then I turned and walked straight into the restroom without looking back. I locked myself in and sat there in silence for 10 minutes. By the time I came out, I'd made up my mind. I was done having feelings for Brett. An hour later, we got off the plane. On the way to the hotel, Brett and I didn't say a single word to each other. I hauled my luggage into the elevator alone, rode up alone, and ate lunch alone. Brett said he'd come on this trip for me, but in reality, he spent every minute with Tiana. And I figured that was fine. After all, I had my AI. The AI had my itinerary for the next few days organized down to the last detail, laid out in a neat little chart. But halfway through reading it, someone snatched my phone out of my hands. I looked up and saw Tiana, grinning smugly. Wow, this itinerary is so detailed. Brett, you definitely made this for Mara, right? I frowned and reached to take my phone back, but Brett had already taken it from Tiana. He glanced at it and frowned. I didn't make this. Then he looked up at me. You don't have the patience for something like this, and I would know. Who made this for you? I took my phone back, annoyed, and ignored the flicker of unease I'd caught in his eyes. That's none of your business. But do you think it's okay to just grab someone's phone and look through it without permission? I honestly hadn't meant anything by it. Anyone who'd had those two in their ear the whole trip would have been in a bad mood. But Tiana took it the wrong way. She stepped back, her eyes welling up. Brett, Mara, do you guys just not want me here? I get it. The smart kids only want to hang out with other smart kids. Someone like me, who could barely pass a test, isn't good enough. She wiped at her tears and turned to leave. Brett stopped her and looked back at me with barely contained rage. Mara, don't you think that was a bit much? It's just a stupid itinerary. Was it really worth getting mad over? I stared at the two of them, baffled. Then it hit me that Tiana actually had a point. Yeah, it was worth it. Even if it's just a stupid itinerary, someone still put time and effort into making it for me. I'll go on my own. You two do whatever you want. I picked up my things and walked past Brett without stopping. I'd planned to come by myself in the first place. Brett was right. It was time for me to grow up. I didn't hesitate. I followed the route the AI had mapped out for me, and after about an hour, I found the beach on my own. The ocean was beautiful. It made me think of the very first time the idea of seeing it had crossed my mind. I'd caught a faint scent on Brett and asked him what it was. He tried to play it cool, but the tips of his ears turned red. It's what the ocean breeze smells like. Mara, after we graduate, do you want to go see the ocean with me? I'd been so happy that day. But now, the only person who'd actually shown up to see the ocean was me. I snapped a quick photo and sent it to the AI. His reply was instant. Turn around. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I spun around, but my view was blocked by two figures, Brett and Tiana. I got to my feet and looked past them desperately. There was nothing there. The disappointment on my face must have been obvious, because Brett sighed. Mara, when are you ever going to grow up? As he spoke, he draped his shirt over my shoulders. I finally snapped out of my thought, pulled his shirt off, and shoved it back into his hands. I don't need it. Something in Brett's eyes darkened. Tiana, let's go. She's just ungrateful. He stormed off without looking back. Tiana didn't follow him. I was staring at my chat with the AI, too out of it to notice what Tiana was doing. Mara, I'm trying to apologize to you. Are you even listening? I felt someone touch my hearing aid and jerked my head up. What are you doing? But I flinched back too hard, and Tiana ripped the hearing aid right out of my ear. A sharp pain shot through my inner ear, and I stared at her in shock. Hey, give that back. But Tiana's expression changed. A smug, amused smile appeared on her face. Forgive me first, and I'll give it back. In that moment, I finally understood why so many people couldn't stand Tiana. I had no reason to play nice with her, and I kept my face serious. My hearing aid is expensive. If you break it, you can't afford to replace it. Give it back right now. But Tiana glanced over her shoulder at Brett's retreating figure, and the smugness in her eyes only deepened. Drop the act, Mara. I don't blame Brett for getting sick of you. You really are pathetic. As she spoke, she raised her arm and dangled my hearing aid in the air. Then she opened her hand. I watched helplessly as it fell into the sand and was swept away by the waves. What the hell is wrong with you, Tiana? I rushed into the water without thinking, desperate to get it back. That was when someone appeared beside me and pushed me back toward the shore. It's too dangerous. Let me look for it. Through my blurred vision, I was sure of one thing. It wasn't Brett. The seawater was freezing, churning with jagged white foam that stung my ankles. As the waves broke against the shore, my world had gone half silent, a muffled, terrifying blur of crashing sound on my right side, and complete, hollow stillness on my left where Tiana had ripped my hearing aid away. I lunged forward, desperate, but the undertow was strong. Then, a hand clamped firmly around my upper arm. Strong, steady, and warm. Against the icy spray. It's too dangerous. Let me look for it. The voice didn't come through my hearing aid. It vibrated straight into my chest, deep and resonant. I was turned around with gentle authority and guided back toward the dry sand before I could even blink. I wiped the seawater from my eyes, blinking against the harsh sunlight. Standing at the water's edge was a young man in a charcoal jacket, his dark hair soaked Through, his jawline sharp, and his gray eyes focused intensely on the churning waves below. He didn't hesitate. He stepped straight into the surf, plunging his arm into the swirling foam where the tide was pulling sand back into the sea. "Hey!" I called out, my voice sounding strangely muted to my own ears. "Stop. The tide is too rough." He didn't listen. He reached down into the rocks, his fingers searching blindly through the sand. A second later, he pulled his hand back up. Blood dripped from a fresh scratch on his knuckles, but between his wet fingers was a small, flesh-colored piece of molded plastic. My hearing aid. He walked back out of the water, the wet sand crunching beneath his boots. He stopped right in front of me, breathing slightly heavily. Without saying a word, he pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket, wiped the wet device as dry as he could, and handed it to me. "The internal receiver might be shorted from the salt water," he said slowly, pronouncing every word clearly so I could read his lips even in my half-deaf state. "Don't put it back in your ear yet. It needs to dry out, or it'll shock you." I stared at the hearing aid, then up at him. He was tall, comfortably over 6 feet, with a quiet, undeniable presence that commanded the space around him. There was something strangely familiar about the way he stood, straight and unyielding, like a shield against the wind. Who are you?" I stammered, my heart beating frantically against my ribs. Before he could answer, loud footsteps pounded against the boardwalk behind us. "Mara. What the hell are you doing?" Brett came marching back, his face flushed with anger. Tiana was right behind him, her hands folded innocently in front of her dress, putting on her best victim facade. "I leave you alone for 5 minutes and you're diving into the ocean with some random guy?" Brett snapped, grabbing my shoulder to pull me away from the stranger. "And why are you soaking wet? Are you out of your mind?" The tall man didn't flinch. He stepped smoothly between Brett and me, his height forcing Brett to stop dead in his tracks. The stranger's gaze dropped onto Brett's hand on my arm with cold disgust. "Take your hand off her," the stranger said softly. His voice was low, but it held a sharp edge that made the air feel suddenly freezing. Brett blinked, taken aback. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm her childhood friend. I've taken care of her since she was 6. Who are you to tell me what to do?" The stranger slowly pulled his phone out of his coat pocket. He tapped the screen once and held it up. Displayed on the screen was a familiar chat interface, the exact dark mode AI application Brett had sent me 10 days ago. But at the top of the screen, where the bot profile was supposed to be, was a verified developer badge and a name. Kalin Vance. "I'm the person who has been taking care of her for the last 10 days while you were busy neglecting her," Kalin said coldly. "And I'm the one who mapped out her trip so she wouldn't have to deal with you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Brett stared at the phone screen, his eyes wide with confusion and rising anger. "What is this?" "That's just an AI app. I downloaded the beta link from a tech forum. It was a closed beta neural network for adaptive hearing assistance," Kalin replied smoothly, locking his phone and slipping it back into his pocket. "It uses real-time auditory data and natural language processing to assist people with hearing loss. I am the lead developer at Vance Acoustics. When you carelessly threw that link at her to shirk your responsibility, her profile activated on my server." Kalin turned his gray eyes toward Brett, his expression unreadable. "I saw her speech-to-text logs. I saw how you talked to her. An AI provides answers, Carver. But a human gives a damn. So I took over the manual override." My breath hitched in my throat. All those late-night conversations. The detailed itinerary. The prompt responses when I was feeling lost. It hadn't been an emotionless machine. It had been him. A real person, watching over me, answering me in real time, holding my hand through a screen while the boy who promised to protect me for 12 years tossed me aside like trash. You were talking to me?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Kalin turned to look at me. The icy look in his eyes instantly melted into something warm, almost tender. "I'm sorry for keeping up the lie for a few days, Mara. But I wanted to make sure you were safe before I introduced myself in person." "This is ridiculous." Tiana chimed in, stepping out from behind Brett. Her voice was sharp and defensive. Mara, you're letting some creepy stalker trick you. Brett is the one who actually cares about you. He came all the way to Briar Island just because his mom forced him to. Shut up, Tiana, I said clearly. Tiana froze. Brett looked at me, stunned. He had never heard me speak to anyone like that before. Mara. Brett started, his voice softening slightly, though a defensive scowl still marred his face. Look, I didn't know the app was connected to a real guy. But this is weird. He's a stranger. Come back to the hotel with me and Tiana. We'll sort out your hearing aid. Sort it out? Kalin cut in, his voice dangerous. He gestured toward Tiana. You mean after your girlfriend deliberately snatched her hearing aid out of her ear and dropped it in the sea? Brett turned to Tiana, frowning. What? Tiana, you said Mara dropped it by accident because she was dizzy. I didn't. Tiana squeaked, her face turning pale. She's lying. She dropped it herself to make Brett mad at me. The boardwalk behind us has 3 high-definition surveillance cameras operated by the Briar Island Maritime Authority, Kalin said calmly, pointing to the light poles above us. Intentional destruction of a medical device valued over $3,000 qualifies as felony property damage. Should I call the local precinct right now, or would you prefer to handle this through hotel security? Tiana's jaw dropped. She looked at Brett, panic clear in her eyes. Brett. He's lying, right? Tell him to stop. Brett looked back and forth between Tiana's frantic face and my dripping wet, quiet stance. For the first time in months, a heavy seed of doubt seemed to plant itself in his mind. Is that true, Tiana? Brett asked, his voice low. Did you touch her hearing aid? I was just joking around. Tiana cried out, her composure completely shattering. She was being so arrogant, acting like she was better than us just because she got a high score on the mocks. I just wanted to teach her a lesson. Brett stared at her, horrified. Teach her a lesson? Tiana, she can't hear without it. I didn't stay to watch the rest of their drama. I felt exhausted, cold, and utterly done with both of them. I turned to Kalin. Can we leave? Kalin didn't hesitate. My car is parked near the pier. Let's get you dry. He gently draped his dry, warm wool jacket around my shivering shoulders. It smelled faintly of rain and cedarwood. As he guided me away from the beach, Brett called out my name, his voice laced with panic. Mara. Wait. Mara, don't leave with him. I didn't turn back. Not once. Kalin's car was a sleek black SUV. The heat was already blaring when he opened the passenger door for me. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a clean towel and a brand new, unopened box. He handed me the towel first, letting me dry my wet hair, before placing the box on my lap. What's this? I asked, looking at the sleek white packaging. A prototype from my lab, Kalin said, slipping into the driver's seat beside me. He didn't start the engine right away. Instead, he opened the box, revealing a small, shimmering silver earpiece that looked more like an elegant piece of jewelry than a medical apparatus. It's an adaptive bone conduction audio receiver, he explained, holding it gently between his long fingers. It doesn't rely on the ear canal. It transmits sound vibrations directly through the temporal bone. It's waterproof, custom calibrated, and twice as clear as your old model. He leaned in closer. May I? My breath hitched. His face was only inches from mine. Up close, I could see the faint speckles of gold in his gray eyes and the quiet intensity of his focus. I nodded slowly. His fingers were cool and extremely gentle as he brushed my hair behind my left ear. He carefully placed the silver clip over my ear bone. Click. Instantly, the world exploded into vibrant, crisp clarity. The soft hum of the car engine, the gentle rain beginning to patter against the windshield, the sound of Kalin's steady breathing, everything was so clear it made my eyes sting with unshed tears. For years, my hearing had felt like listening to the world through a thick layer of felt. This was light. How does it sound? Kalin asked, looking into my eyes. It's incredible, I whispered, my voice caught in my throat. I can hear everything. Good, Kalin smiled softly. It was the first time I had seen him smile, and it completely transformed his sharp face into something breathlessly handsome. Because you deserve to hear the world clearly, Mara. Without having to beg anyone to speak up. A teardrop slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. 12 years. 12 years, Brett had treated my disability as a chore, a burden he was forced to bear because of an oath his mother made him swear. He complained about my quietness, yelled into my good ear when he was frustrated, and made me feel like an incomplete human being. And here was a man I had only met today, who had built a miracle just to make sure I was okay. Why are you doing all of this for me? I asked, looking down at my lap. You don't owe me anything. We don't even know each other. Kalin started the car, turning the wheel as we pulled out of the parking lot onto the coastal highway. My father was the chief audiologist at the hospital you were brought to when you were 6 years old, Kalin said quietly, his eyes on the road. I was 12. I was sitting in my father's office doing homework when your parents brought you in. You were crying silently, holding your hands over your ears, while that boy's mother was screaming at him in the hallway. I froze, memory fragments flashing through my mind. My father told me that day that auditory trauma in young children is one of the hardest things to treat, because society treats hearing loss like an invisible flaw, Kalin continued. I made up my mind right then that I would build technology that would give people their voices back. He glanced at me, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second. I followed your medical record updates through my father's research foundation over the years. When Brett posted that beta link on the public developer board asking for an AI to manage a clingy girl, I recognized your name instantly. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. I was furious, Mara. A girl who fought so hard to adapt to a quiet world didn't deserve to be called a leech by someone who couldn't appreciate her strength. My heart pounded violently against my ribs. It wasn't pity. There was no pity in Kalin's eyes, only respect, and a deep, protective fire that made me feel warm from the inside out. That evening, the storm finally hit Briar Island. Heavy rain lashed against the windows of the hotel suite Kalin had booked for me, a stunning, top-floor room overlooking the dark, turbulent ocean. Kalin had insisted I rest, ordering a hot meal for me before retreating to his own room next door to review some research papers. At 8 p.m., a frantic pounding sounded at my door. I walked over and checked the peephole. It was Brett. He was drenched from head to toe, his hair plastered to his forehead, his face pale and stressed. I opened the door, keeping the security latch engaged. Mara. Brett gasped, stepping forward, but the latch caught the door with a sharp thud. He looked at the chain, his eyes filled with disbelief. Mara, open the door. Please. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Brett, I said calmly, standing on the other side of the gap. I kicked Tiana out, Brett rushed out, his voice desperate and cracking under the pressure of the wind outside. I called her a cab to the ferry terminal. She lied to me, Mara. She confessed to the hotel manager after Kalin threatened to pull the security tapes. I had no idea she was that vicious. You didn't know because you didn't care to look, I replied softly. Whenever it came to Tiana, you always assumed I was the one being difficult. I was wrong. Brett yelled, slamming his hand against the doorframe. Okay? I was wrong. I was frustrated because you were changing. You dyed your hair, you bought new clothes, you stopped texting me, and you planned this trip without me. I felt like I was losing control, Mara. I felt like you didn't need me anymore. I stared at him through the gap in the door, feeling a profound sense of sadness, not for myself, but for him. You never wanted me to rely on you, Brett, I said quietly. You spent years complaining about how heavy I was to carry. But the moment I learned to walk on my own, you got mad because I wasn't falling behind you anymore. That's not true, tears welled up in Brett's eyes. My mom called me an hour ago. She found out what happened. She told me if I come home without you, she's disowning me. Mara, remember the oath? I swore to take care of you forever. I knelt in front of you when we were 6. That oath was a curse for both of us, I said, my voice steady and resolute. Your mother forced you to carry a debt you were too young to understand. And Because of that debt, you grew to resent me, and I grew to feel like a burden. It made our friendship toxic. I reached up and unlatched the chain. For a second, Brett's face lit up with hope. He thought I was going to let him in, that things would go back to the way they were. Instead, I stood in the doorway, looking him dead in the eye. I release you from that oath, Brett, I said clearly. You don't owe me anything anymore. And I don't owe you my silence. Mara. Brett reached out a trembling hand to grasp my arm, but before he could touch me, a tall shadow fell over both of us. Kalin stepped out of his room next door. He was dressed in a comfortable gray sweater, looking relaxed and completely at home. He placed a warm hand on my shoulder, drawing me gently back into the room. She gave you her answer, Carver, Kalin said coldly. Go back to your hotel room. If you knock on this door again, security will escort you off the property. Brett stared at Kalin's hand on my shoulder, then at me. He saw the way I didn't pull away from Kalin. He saw the new, elegant silver earpiece resting against my ear, a piece of technology far superior to anything he had ever helped me maintain. He realized, with absolute, soul-crushing clarity, that he had been replaced. Not by force, but because he had voluntarily handed me over to someone better. Mara. Brett's voice broke, a tear finally spilling over his cheek. Please, don't do this. Goodbye, Brett, I said softly. And with that, I closed the door. 2 months later. The summer heat was fading into the crisp, cool breeze of autumn as the fresh academic year began at Briarwood Institute of Technology, one of the top universities in the country. I stood on the brick pathway of the campus quad, holding my orientation binder against my chest. The university was stunning, surrounded by ancient oak trees, draped in golden leaves and modern glass research facilities. I was wearing an emerald green knit sweater, a pleated skirt, and knee-high boots. My hair, now styled in soft chestnut waves, bounced lightly in the breeze. Attached to my left ear was Kalin's silver bone conduction device, gleaming quietly like a piece of high-end fine jewelry. Over the past 2 months, my life had completely transformed. I had spent the summer interning advanced acoustics under Kalin's mentorship. Freed from the anxiety of constantly worrying about Brett's mood, my true potential blossomed. I helped test user interface algorithms for auditory accessibility, worked alongside top engineers, and earned a full scholarship to Briarwood's biomedical engineering program. Mara. I turned around. Kalin was walking down the steps of the advanced neural research lab. He wore a crisp white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, looking every bit the elite graduate research lead he was. A group of female freshmen standing nearby hushed each other, whispering excitedly as they watched him walk toward me. Kalin was famous on campus, brilliant, wealthy, incredibly handsome, and notoriously cold to anyone who tried to flirt with him. But as he reached me, his sharp features softened instantly. He naturally took my heavy backpack from my shoulders and slung it over his own arm. How was your first linear algebra lecture? He asked, walking alongside me down the leaf-strewn path. Easier than the neural mapping papers you made me read last night, I teased, smiling up at him. Kalin chuckled, a low, rich sound. Good. Then you won't have an excuse when you fail my lab's entry exam next week. I won't fail, I said confidently, stepping closer to his side. I have the best teacher. As we walked toward the campus dining hall, a sudden commotion broke out near the fountain. A guy in a crumpled t-shirt and jeans was arguing with a girl near the benches. His hair was messy, his eyes bloodshot, and he looked entirely exhausted. It was Brett. Beside him, Tiana was crying, clutching a stack of dropped textbooks. Brett, why won't you just help me with my chemistry homework? Tiana sobbed, her voice carrying across the quiet courtyard. You promised you'd help me. We both got into the community college branch across town. We were supposed to stick together. Shut up, Tiana. Brett yelled, his voice laced with venom and exhaustion. I only failed my Briarwood entrance exams because I was stressed out over what happened with Mara. If you hadn't thrown her hearing aid into the sea, my mom wouldn't have cut off my allowance. I'm broke because of you. You're blaming me? Tiana screamed back, her manipulative sweetness completely gone. You were the one who gave her away to that AI app. You were sick of her. You used me to make her jealous, and now that she's gone, you're acting like a victim. The surrounding students stopped to watch, whispering and giggling at the messy drama unfolding in the middle of campus. Brett looked around, his face burning with humiliation. And that was when his eyes landed on me. He froze. Brett stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost. I was standing under the golden canopy of the oak trees, backlit by the late afternoon sun. I looked healthy, vibrant, stunningly confident, and entirely unbothered. Beside me stood Kalin Vance, the top researcher on campus, carrying my bag, standing close to me with a protective posture. Brett dropped his hands to his sides. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The contrast between us was brutal. He was drowning in the mess he had created with Tiana, stuck in a lower tier program, cut off financially by his mother, and miserable. I had stepped into the light, thriving, pursuing my dreams, surrounded by people who respected me. Brett took a hesitant step toward me, leaving Tiana crying by the fountain. Mara. He whispered, his voice trembling as he stopped a few feet away. Mara, you look amazing. I looked at him calmly. Hello, Brett. Mara, please. Brett stepped closer, his eyes pleading, completely ignoring the onlookers. I made a terrible mistake. These past 2 months have been a nightmare. Tiana is insane, my mom won't talk to me, and I can't sleep at night thinking about how I treated you. I ruined everything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn plastic object, the egg slicer he used to use when he peeled eggs for me during our high school study sessions. Look, Brett stammered, his eyes filling with desperate tears. I kept it. Remember how I used to peel eggs for you before exams? I can do it again. I can take care of you, Mara. We have 12 years of history. You can't just throw 12 years away for a guy you met 2 months ago. I looked at the egg slicer in his hand, then up into his bloodshot eyes. 2 months ago, those words would have broken my heart. Today, they didn't evoke a single ripple of emotion inside me. Brett, I said softly, my voice filled with clarity. You didn't ruin our 12 years because of a mistake. You ruined them because you believed my devotion was guaranteed, no matter how badly you treated me. I stepped closer to Kalin, gently slipping my hand into Kalin's long fingers. Kalin's hand closed around mine instantly, warm, firm, and grounding. You thought I was a leech because I depended on you, I continued, looking Brett dead in the eye. But the truth is, you needed me to be weak so you could feel strong. Kalin didn't take care of me because I was helpless. He gave me the tools so I would never have to be helpless again. Brett looked down at our joined hands. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The quiet, fragile girl who used to follow him everywhere, hiding behind his shoulder whenever the world got too loud, was gone forever. And he was the one who had driven her away. I don't hate you, Brett, I added softly. But I don't need you anymore. Tiana came running up, grabbing Brett's arm aggressively. Brett. Come on. Stop embarrassing yourself in front of these snobs. Brett didn't even look at her. He just stood there, completely hollowed out. Tears rolling down his cheeks as he watched me turn my back on him. Kalin adjusted my bag on his shoulder, squeezed my hand gently, and guided me down the path toward the research building. Behind us, the wind rustled through the autumn leaves, swallowing up Brett's quiet, desperate sobs. 1 year later, the Briarwood Innovation Gala was in full swing inside the grand ballroom of the university's technology center. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting a warm, brilliant glow over hundreds of distinguished guests, tech investors, and university faculty. I stood near the balcony doors, wearing an elegant dusty blue satin evening gown. My hair was swept up in a loose, graceful bun, highlighting the slender line of my neck and the glittering silver ear cuff resting against my left ear. Presenting the recipient of this year's National Biomedical Breakthrough Award. The presenter's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. The Vance Kessler Acoustic Research Team. Thunderous applause erupted throughout the ballroom. Kalin, looking impossibly handsome in a tailored black tuxedo, stood up from the head table. He didn't walk toward the stage immediately. Instead, he walked over to where I was standing, offered me his arm, and smiled softly. Ready, partner, he whispered. I smiled back, placing my hand over his arm. Always. Together, we walked up the steps to the stage. The presenter handed us the crystal trophy, a sleek structure representing sound waves transforming into light. The award was for our joint project, an AI-driven, self-calibrating neural auditory system that allowed thousands of hearing-impaired children across the country to perceive sound with flawless clarity. Kalin stepped up to the microphone first. He adjusted it, looked out over the crowd of investors and academic elite, and spoke in his deep, confident voice. When I started this project, I believed technology was about solving problems. Kalin said into the microphone. But a year ago, I met someone who taught me that true technology isn't just about fixing what is broken. It's about giving someone the freedom to be heard. He turned his head to look directly at me, his gray eyes shining with intense, unwavering devotion. This award doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Mara Kessler, the strongest, most brilliant person I have ever had the privilege to stand beside. The crowd broke into enthusiastic applause once more. Later that night, long after the speeches were finished and the gala had wound down, Kalin and I walked out onto the private observation deck overlooking the ocean cliffside behind the university campus. The cool night air brushed against my skin. Far below, the dark ocean waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, sparkling under the moonlight. Through my silver earpiece, I could hear every nuance of the sea, the deep, thunderous boom of the tide, the soft, crisp spray of the foam against the rocks, and the gentle sigh of the wind through the trees. It was no longer frightening. It was beautiful. Kalin stepped up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and pulling me back against his chest. He rested his chin gently on top of my head, breathing in the scent of my hair. "What are you listening to?" he murmured softly into my good ear. I leaned back against him, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart behind my back, the safest place in the entire world. "I'm listening to the ocean," I whispered, resting my hands over his. "It doesn't sound scary anymore." "Why?" Kalin asked, his lips brushing against my temple. I turned around in his arms, looking up into those beautiful gray eyes that had looked after me, guided me, and loved me without ever asking me to shrink myself. "Because I'm not listening to it alone anymore," I said, reaching up to gently cup his cheek. "And because I know that no matter how loud the world gets, you'll always be right here." Kalin smiled, his gaze dropping to my lips before rising back to meet my eyes. "I'm right here," Kalin repeated softly, echoing the very first words he had ever typed to me through that AI screen. "I won't hide, I won't back away, and I won't run. I've got you, Mara. Forever." He leaned down, and as his lips met mine under the starlit sky, the sound of the ocean swelled around us, clear, bright, and endlessly beautiful.